Hi everyone, my name is Shaun. I'm a digital accessibility leader and I currently work at a government digital service where I'm the head of accessibility on the GovUK One Login programme. And the image on the deck is myself, my wife, my little boy and my little girl. That's my crew. And this is Daisy. So I've been really fortunate throughout my career to lead on accessibility at some pretty cool places. I'm particularly proud of my CV, but I always feel like a bit of an imposter, which is weird, having good job titles at places like these. So my job is about reminding people that disability isn't just part of somebody else's story. It's a chapter in your story if you're lucky enough to live a long life. So what we're going to talk about today is accessibility compliance, a little bit about how we begin to shift left, and then a look at some what I think beyond compliance could look like. My mother is here today, so I'm going to go into keep this very high level so she understands. And one of the instructions on number 3 there is, even if this is a bit shit, just give us a clap at the end so my mum thinks I'm good. So I've got to be honest, I'm a little bit worried. The number of people who are applying for accessibility jobs has gone through the roof, which is really, really good news as somebody who leads accessibility teams. Recently at GDS, we had a recruitment for a senior accessibility specialist. We got a shit ton of applications, really high quality, but there's a problem, and it's a problem because applicants are forgetting about what's important, and that's people. Only 2 applicants out of nearly 60 actually mentioned user focus or what the impact of their work does. It was very heavily focused around technical compliance and WCAG and this and compliant to this and worked with a developer and done this. In fact, very few people mentioned disabled people at all, which I couldn't quite wrap my head around. So I'm thinking, well, we've got all of this interest in accessibility. Surely people aren't forgetting about disabled people in all of this. So the interviews were really difficult, and they were hard because technical compliance was just front and centre of everybody's approach to the work that they were doing. Now this is understandable because a lot of accessibility or a lot of people in the profession currently are either recovering developers who then move on to become accessibility people. So we sort of have the lens of like, right, okay, well, we're going to focus just on the technical stuff. And that creates a barrier because other people who might not necessarily be technical think then they can't apply for those jobs because they don't have the technical information. And it creates a bit of a scenario where it's people just don't apply in the first instance. And we have a profession full of ex-developers or current developers, and it's not very good. When we think in this way, it concerns me, and I think the best way of describing it is that we're starting to not be able to see the forest for the trees. We're just focused on literally the WCAG compliant thing and forgetting everything else outside of it. So in the middle of the screen is a black circle, and it says Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. And this is what I think a lot of people think accessibility is. When in reality, WCAG is the dot in the middle, and the green bit is the bit that gets me out of bed in the morning. All the stuff we don't know, all the problems we haven't solved. And I would say if you are applying for accessibility jobs, remember what got you interested in accessibility in the first place. Remember what motivated you. Everyone's got a personal story. Everybody knows somebody who's disabled. You might be disabled yourself. Never lose sight of that. Not for the sake of WCAG or technical compliance anyway. We do this, or at least I do this, because I want to drive change, because I care about people. I want to make things that work for people and give everybody a chance to complete what it is we want them to do. So yeah, the result was our thing was fully accessible. That was a lot of the conversations during these interviews. And that's not true. Sorry, the image description is a puppet looking left and then looking forward. Nothing is fully accessible, it's just more accessible. We're always excluding somebody, and I think we have to get comfortable with that. Compliant doesn't always mean accessible. And I think a lot of the problem, or a lot of the time, the problem lies in the job adverts themselves. So if you've ever seen a job description for any accessibility role ever, there's about 700 bullets with every possible thing about accessibility. And then people will just look at it and think, well, I can't even do half of that. So the technical WCAG / developer side of it is the thing that I think puts the most people off. And for me, we need more diversity of thought and diversity of experience in the profession. Now, I'm aware that a lot of accessibility, or a lot of places, don't have the luxury of an accessibility team. So you might have an accessibility champions networks, which are really good. But I wanted to talk specifically about an example of why I think this is important. And if any of you are familiar with Laura Parker, who was sat up there, Laura did, along with a few other people, some research and guidance around designing for low numeracy or people with dyscalculia, and put that guidance out there. And I think it was one of the top shared gov.uk pages last year. Now, if you stick 10 developers in a room, they would still be arguing about the wording of WCAG, and they wouldn't have never have got to any of those, the good guidance that we've put out there. So we're learning, we're putting more guidance out, and people are desperate for it. And the other thing I would like to briefly touch on is that we can't blame the applicants when compliance is the strategy for a lot of places. And with that said, I think we're becoming complacent with compliance. So for the sake of my mother, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we mean by compliant. So when we talk about compliance, it's compliance to a law. So in the UK, specifically in the public sector, we have the public sector accessibility regulations, which basically mean that we have to create services that are accessible to the WCAG standards of AA. But we've also got the Equality Act, the European Accessibility Act. There's a lot of different things outside of the public sector as well. So I added these slides in because I think it was yesterday or the day before WCAG turned 25. So I was 12 when the first version of WCAG came out. And in that time, they've went from 1.0 to 2.2, which is not a lot of progress when you think about it. I mean, between 2000 and 2018 years later is when they got to the next version. So it's very slow. And to any of the people who are thinking, well, WCAG 3, we'll all be retired by the time WCAG 3 comes out. So let's not hedge our bets on ever seeing WCAG 3. And there's probably a reason for that because, a lot of the accessibility problems happen because of HTML, and the HTML standard hasn't changed for a long time. But the web is moving at an extraordinarily fast pace, where progressive enhancement is sometimes used when developers are smart, but oftentimes not at all. So WCAG is broken down into 3 levels: A, AA, AAA. If you meet AA, you encompass all of A. So, and AAA is, to be brutally honest, ignored. And that's because it's not required. So, and the unfortunate part about that is that a lot of the cognitive accessibility guidance sits within AAA, so it just gets ignored. So we can translate a lot of the WCAG guidelines into usable things like design systems or checklists. Checklists can be handy, but accessibility is about more than checking lists. And I would also say the same about design systems. Design systems are really good, but the people who use the design systems aren't very good. So the amount of times we've seen something where people misuse components, put components within components, smart-ass developers start changing all of the code, break it, this off-the-shelf, relatively accessible thing becomes a bit of an accessibility nightmare. So there is no silver bullet, and there will never be a silver bullet to accessibility. No overlays, AI. We just don't know too much about it. Now, I'm aware that compliance can be mandatory, so we have to focus on it, specifically in the public sector where I work. WCAG is definitely a useful resource, and accessibility teams tend to be very small. So when I joined GDS, the work that I'd done initially was responding to us onboarding a new supplier. It was a lot to do with compliance, but we didn't have any of the groundwork done. So I understand teams having to focus initially on that as a thing, but it shouldn't be the strategic goal is not just to be compliant, which a lot of the time it's becoming that. So WCAG definitely aren't perfect. In fact, they're far from perfect. And you haven't lived until you've been in a meeting with some developers where they start arguing about the wording of WCAG. I'm looking at Marat here because Marat used to be on my team, and we were an auditing team at HMRC. And I used to just think to myself, like, end it, because I would be in these meetings with really technical people arguing about, well, you know, I interpret this to mean this thing and blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, I'm just sitting there thinking, does it really matter? Probably not. So when we fail to look past the guidelines, we're sort of accepting that that's all there is. And I'm seeing that more and more. I spend a large amount of my time outside of work helping other people. So I try to make myself available. I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm mentoring other people. I'm hearing the stories of different organizations. And they seem to all be doing the same thing and making the same mistakes, at least in my opinion. And the thing with WCAG, which I briefly touched on, is that they're open to interpretation. So I could look at something and 5 other people here, and we would all come to different conclusions about what we think is accessible and what is not accessible. And often, again, we're not putting disabled people in front of the thing to use. We just go, well, we think that it might be this, and then we hope that people don't complain. WCAG also doesn't apply to all contexts. So the service that I'm working on at the minute sort of hands off. So you get halfway down the web journey, it hands off to a mobile thing. You then come back from the mobile back into the web journey. There's a lot of different contexts where WCAG doesn't apply to that, specifically because it's the web content accessibility guidelines and not mobile accessibility guidelines. But I try to think of accessibility more as digital accessibility. So how do we apply some of those themes and concepts to other things? And the guidelines are ironically inaccessible. There was someone on Twitter like a year ago or something and set a challenge to be like, every day I'm going to read one of the success criteria. And I was just sat there thinking, I couldn't think of anything more miserable than spending time reading through each one of those criteria. It's just soul destroying. They're written in technical language. They're not easy to read. It's just a bit of a inaccessible nightmare. And of course, there's not a lot in there about cognitive accessibility. They also create a tick-the-box mentality. And from my experience, when people can't pin a WCAG failure on something, well, those often get coined as usability issues. And I say this a lot. If you follow me on any of the socials, this is something that comes out of my mouth probably once a week. Things can be technically accessible, but not usable, and therefore not accessible at all. And this is because the WCAG, we can't pin the WCAG thing on it, so we put it in usability, where actually it's probably an accessibility fail that just wasn't covered by the criteria. So when we're settling for compliant, we're settling for bare minimum, which for me, this is not about settling for bare minimum. So how do we begin to shift left? And shift left is something that is talked about a lot, but I don't really hear a lot of people talking about what it is and how to do it. So what is it? Basically, what tends to happen is we do an audit, and accessibility isn't considered, so we have to fix all of the stuff. It then goes through design, develop, test, re-audit, design, develop, test, re-audit. We get stuck in this cycle, and we can't really impact any change because people keep making the same mistakes. We've got into bad habits because we're auditing. So when we say shift left, we want to move the goalposts down here to project requirements and make sure that it's fed in throughout. With that said, we can't influence change if we don't have a seat at the table. So wherever I've worked, when I first joined Monzo, if there was a meeting, I was in it. I just had to be everywhere all the time to try and figure out where can I get a seat at all of these important meetings and start to talk about this work. So things that I've done in the past, we have a thing at GDS called the Design Review Board and the Product Steering Group. Those are essentially meetings where people talk about ideas, and that for me is where we can begin to think about accessibility. You can embed into content or design crates, communities of practice. At HMRC we used to have like mock service assessments. I never did get a seat at that table, but that would have been an ideal opportunity to get in, and embedding into ceremonies as well. Be unapologetically optimistic about the work. Now, this can be very hard in this work. Burnout is rife, like we're all trying really hard. But for me, we just have to approach it with real optimism and try to empower people to make people realize we can do this. Not, here's a problem, you go and solve the problem. Like, we have to support the problem. I'm talking about the type of militant optimism that can cause people to spontaneously combust into cringe flames. I'm always overly optimistic. I'm passionate about this stuff. I really enjoy my job. I'm one of those people who will go in and constantly bleat on about this. I'm going to mention Laura again, because I had a conversation with Laura, and Laura said to me, and it stuck with us, and this is conversations I've had with other people as well, am I being too much? If that's what you're asking, you're probably at about the right level of like optimism. Oh, I left that in. But not a lot of people are not everyone is going to care about accessibility, is what I'm trying to get across here. The image depicts a cartoon of one person head kicking another person, and it says how we deal with people who don't care about accessibility. For me, and something that I had to learn very quickly, is that we try to empower teams, we don't police. It was interesting when I joined GDS, because immediately when I was asking to be part of meetings, the people were like, well, what is it you're checking? Are you checking up on us? What is it you're assessing? It's like, well, we're not trying to do that. We're trying to collaborate to create better, more accessible experiences for people. And that's because people are used to being policed. So like, you know, you've done this wrong, you need to go and fix it. We've become a bit of a headache for people. And we're not going to win every battle. So make sure you pick your battles and fight fiercely for the ones worth fighting for. I want to give a very, very quick example of this. So at the minute, we're working with a chat supplier. It has been difficult, but getting that right has been extremely important. So that has been my hill to die on. Like, that thing is going to be much better than what it is. It's about trying to figure out which ones are going to have the most impact for your users. And I always say to people, start with a simple question, and literally, who might this be excluding? Whatever you're doing, whatever the context of your work, ask the question, who might this be excluding? So this is Craig Abbott. I'm sure many of you know Craig and his work. And Craig done a brilliant article on accessibility strategy, which I have used when I went to Monzo. I used these principles. And it focuses on a culture of your culture, So that is, we embrace accessibility and we embed it into everything that we do. We're compliant, and we set teams up to succeed with education. And without each one of those things, the strategy can't work. But what I've found, or at least what I found at Monzo when I was there, if you take care of culture and education, compliance tends to take care of itself, because people are already giving a shit about the work. A key thing is that your strategy should be a reminder of all of the things that you shouldn't be doing. There's a really bad habit within this profession at the minute that we just take too much on. We say yes to everything. We want to fix everything. And that just detracts from the work that you should be doing. And my advice as well, if you do have an accessibility strategy, make sure that the things that you're doing are measurable. So if you are doing training, measure, let's say, I don't know, your developers are making the same mistakes with a particular component. You do the training, you then measure that those failures are coming down. So it's going to help with getting additional buy-in for more work going forward. And I just very quickly wanted to touch on burnout as well, because it's something that you see time and time again. I've seen multiple podcast articles, and I've been there myself. It is absolutely brutal. So just look after yourself in this work. Very quickly, I wanted to shine a light on culture, the three pillars of Craig's strategy work, and things that you can do in the context of your own work to try and bring the strategy to life. So for your culture, you could focus on accessibility clinics, lived experience speakers, embedding into communities of practice, celebrating initiatives. And something that worked for me at Monzo as well was accessibility principles. So we looked at things like the WCAG guidelines and universal design principles, and then how do those fit within the context of Monzo and what we're trying to do. And that was a collaboration with some senior designers and developers across the board, and they were really good. For education, it can be role-based training. I can't stress enough the importance of role-based training, not just random training for everybody. Like, it's very important that we're teaching people within the context of their role, what it is they can do to make things more accessible. Assistive technology training, so give your developers the tools to be able to test the things that they're building. When I was at the NHS, that was something that I did there. And it just started to create a bit of a culture where the developers were like setting themselves a challenge to make stupid things work on screen readers. But it worked because it got the conversation going, and it improved the outcomes that we were looking for as well. Workshops and talks, as I very briefly touched on earlier, an Accessibility Champions Network can be a real force propellant for the work that you're trying to do. Bring in all different kinds of experience and jobs and all of that stuff, and you'll see great benefit in that as well. And then in terms of compliance, we're looking at things like governance and assurance. A thing that I'm looking at the moment at JDS is like non-functional requirements, making sure that those are built into all of our JIRA tickets and that stuff. Policy was the one that I focused on at Monzo. So Monzo's tagline, or whatever you call it, was like make money work for everybody, which is essentially a commitment in itself to accessibility. But it didn't mean anything if we didn't have the policy to underpin the message that we were trying to send. So everything that we did was focused on people. And also creating support channels for people to get help as well is really, really important. So beyond compliance, if we change nothing, nothing changes. And for me, it's about solving real problems for real users. And I want to just talk a little bit about when I was at Monzo. So I was a developer for many years at the NHS. I supported the NHS when the public sector accessibility regulations came in. That was a really responsive piece of work, and it was a huge strategic piece. Then I moved to HMRC, where I became their accessibility lead. So again, it was all about compliance, and I was just burned out from compliance. I was sick of it. I was thinking, like, this is not what this is about. So when I went to Monzo, it was a really good opportunity to just take a step back from compliance altogether and say, like, actually, what are the real problems here? So I started with a gap assessment, and for me, I didn't have to look far to start finding issues. And you'll find when you just zoom out and take the WCAG hat off, you go, there's an obvious problem, there's an obvious problem. So for me, an example, and this is not to do with digital accessibility, but just a wider inclusion thing, I would listen to loads of customer complaints. I was trying to build a picture of what people were, like, what are some of the problems, what are customers saying? And what was really clear to me, Monzo tag all of their calls. So if you came through and you were happy to log to Monzo that you had a disability, it would get tagged, so I could filter by tags and listen to some of the calls. And honestly, hearing some of the call center staff talk to disabled people was like enraging. But it wasn't their fault, because they just had no training. They didn't know how to talk to disabled people. It was just horrendous. So that, for me, there's a gap. We solved that. We need customer service training. 2,000 people immediately got mandatory training. And that was, beginning to solve that problem. Another thing, does anyone have a Monzo account? Yeah. So the Monzo cards, bright coral, I think they call it, white text. There's color contrast issues there. There's a really bad trend in the banking industry now, where they're just taking away embossing and all of that stuff, numberless cards, taking away all of these things that serve as accessibility features for people. So that was another issue. And there was loads of different things. One particular example I want to talk about is a feature when you sign up for a Monzo account. You hold your phone up and you say, "Hi, my name is Shaun, and I want a Monzo account." And that's not very inclusive. So I'm laughing at the note, nudes in the shower. Right. So what we found, and of course, like, if we're asking customers to hold the phone out, and first of all, not everybody can hold the phone in front of their face. We have non-verbal customers. We have there's a whole host of inclusion issues in there. And also, we need to think about preferences as well. So some people, like me, just don't like holding the phone up to my face and seeing my face. Now, I would love to say that this is my quote, but realistically, I went on Google Gemini and I said, this is what I'm trying to say, can you make as a quote? And this is what I come back with, and I quite liked it. Accessibility is a symphony of design where user needs play the melody and preferences harmonize the experience. So what did we do to make this thing more inclusive? And actually, I need to talk about the problem a little bit more first. So one of the issues that we found was that when we were asking customers to take a picture of themselves, a lot of people with visual impairments weren't in frame. They didn't know. We were getting shoulder shots, and because they couldn't see the screen, they didn't know what they were taking a photo of, reduced the quality. They would then bounce them onto account. The customer gets, it was just complaints all over because of it. It's very surprising as well, which leads me on to nudes in the shower, how many people sign up for a bank account in the shower or naked. And we didn't, and there's also a broader inclusion thing here as well, because we weren't telling people that a human could view the thing that they were saying or the video that they would send. And, for religious reasons, like some people might wear headscarves, and, we're asking people for a picture of their face, and there was a whole host of problems there. So what we did do is we changed it to say, sign, or communicate how you usually would. So there was no reason why we needed somebody to say, hi, my name's Shaun, but like that, it was to do with security, but it wasn't less secure by letting people sign or write a note down or communicate how they usually would. We introduced sound and haptic feedback when a customer was in frame. So immediately, when the person was in frame, the thing turned green, it pinged and sort of set the haptic off in your hand. And we provided an alternate route as well, because we had a realness check that would sort of strobe for users. And we also told users, by the way, a human might be able to see this. So immediately we get a reduction in all of those complaints, and it's just better and more useful. Not fully accessible, just more accessible. And I just want to talk quickly as well about the time that Uber introduced contactless delivery. For me, that was probably one of the best examples of accidental inclusion I've ever seen. So 2 weeks ago, I was diagnosed as autistic. And I think the turning point for the assessor was when I said, I got in touch with Uber to complain that the drivers weren't respecting contactless delivery, because I just don't want to have to deal with people when I get my food. Leave my food, let me pick it up. They didn't realise this, but that's solving a problem for a whole bunch of people. And it's not just people like me who prefer not to talk to people when they're getting their food, but there's just a lot of people at the end of the day who have had 17 meetings that day who just cannot be asked, leave the food, see you later. So exclusion happens when we make bad assumptions, and bad assumptions equals disabled users. This is really important because we talk about the medical model and the social model of disability, and we all say, yeah, the social model of disability. But then when we talk about accessibility, we sort of revert back to the medical model thinking, and it's the things that we make and the assumptions that we make that disable our users. I really love this quote by Gareth Ford Williams, who is somebody who I have a lot of respect for as well. Better data leads you to better assumption, which in turn leads to better outcomes. Hayden Pickering said at his recent AxCon talk, design for the tools, not what you think you know about the users. And I think this is a really important distinction to make. Like, we can just make it technically work. We don't know how people use the tools. So like another example of something that we worked on at GDS with the chat solution was that they said, oh, well, it technically works. And then they give us a list of instructions, what were like 100 pages long. Go to page 270 of Google, scroll through all your device settings, and it just meant, it's like, well, that's not technically working. Just make it technically work and let the user choose how they use their technology, the assistive tech. Not all assistive tech users are disabled, and not all disabled people use assistive tech. So I was reading some stats last night, I think it was, and it was about captions. Facebook are saying like 80% of people now are using captions. This is really important for accessibility, because what we need to do is distinguish between user needs, so people who need to use the technology, and people who prefer to use the technology. People these days are using accessibility features without realizing that they're using accessibility features. So if you wouldn't look at the data and say, well, 80% of people use captions, therefore all of those people are blind. I just wanted to sort of start wrapping up by saying that we did some user segmentation research at GDS recently. There's going to be a blog about this, and just keep an eye on it because it's absolutely fascinating. This research was, I think 2,000 or 3,000 people, I can't remember the exact numbers, but the research that we did changed our perception of everything. Like, we were wrong on so many fronts, it was unbelievable. But I want to call out one key thing here, and it was that 16% of users reported using assistive technology, which is significantly higher. Like, usually if we're talking about screen reader users, or if we were to measure it from Monzo, for example, it would say like 0.5% of people use screen readers. This number is significant. It's not because there are more disabled people. It might be, actually, we don't know, but it's because children are coming through school now with all of the reasonable adjustments. And what I want to point out as well is a lot of these, a huge proportion of this data was kids and young adults. So they're coming out of school having all the reasonable adjustments for all assistive tech, and they're expecting to be able to use it on things every day, essentially. So we need to join up the data. At Monzo, I focused on complaints, social media, research, call center, analytics. Like, there's so much quantitative, I always get them mixed up, research. And we can begin to pull out people's needs and preferences. And I think it's important that, as much as this is about accessibility, is like, of course, making things work on assistive technology, especially for disabled people. But there's a lot of people who are using these features and functions as like preferences as well, so we need to measure that. And I think if we widen the lens by doing that, rather than we say, we're focusing on blind users, if we just say we focus on people who can't see very well, which is 75% of people wear glasses, we get better outcomes when we begin to think that way as well. An interesting thing as well from Monzo is that they were capturing all kinds of metrics that you shouldn't capture. But one of them was about dynamic type, which is the font scalability. And over 30% of Monzo customers had that scaled up by at least 2 sizes. And that, for me, begs the question, well, if 30% of the users, why don't we just design it to be not as friggin' small? It should go without saying, but I think to go beyond compliance, we need to research, co-design and usability test with disabled people. There's just not enough of it going on, point blank. Research within the context of your product or service. So I always like to talk about HMRC with this, because at least what I found, the researchers would give all of this data every month, like, we've researched with 700 people, and then they would say, and then we've researched with 4 assistive tech users or disabled people. It's like, well, hang on, just if you've researched with 700 people, then at least 25% of those people are going to be. We're just not asking the right questions. And rather than just focus on a screen reader user, why don't we focus on people with who might be dyslexic or struggle reading numbers? This is a tax service that's heavily policy, ADHD. Like, those are the users that you need to go and research with in the context of that service. You get much better outcomes if you just think about it. Who might we be excluding? Go for those people. Use WCAG as a springboard. This is really important. Like, we need to not let WCAG define our whole approach. Like, it's the floor, not the ceiling of accessibility. It's very, very important that we begin to look past it. And I just want to finish up by saying that whenever there seems to be like we're looking people are looking for perfect solutions and perfectly accessible to WCAG. There was an article that a colleague, Richard Morton, who's the head of accessibility at the Cabinet Office, shared, and he said, look, this service have got nothing on their accessibility statement. And then all of the accessibility people went, well, we'll go and find a problem. So this is about progress, not perfection. I'm aware, I speak to people a lot outside of the work. I work with these teams, like people are trying hard, but I think we need to shift the focus from just audit, test, into just thinking more broadly and accept it for what it is. Like, nobody is expecting anything to be perfect. So just focus on progress over perfection. Now I want to end with a quote by somebody who is very important to me, and she's sat right in front of us. Thank you very much.